expect? I sat down with 3 experts for their insights into the U.S.-Russia relationship. Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Robin Wright, a contributing writer for The New Yorker, who's been traveling to Russia since the Reagan administration. And Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for The New York Times and author of Obama, The Call of History, who previously served as Moscow bureau chief for The Washington Post. I want to start with you, Robin. We now know that President Trump will be meeting Putin on the sidelines, I guess, of the G20. What do you expect from that meeting?
I think it's going to be primarily on the sidelines. I think the White House actually doesn't want to do more than what they call lance the boil, to try to break the impasse, get the 2 men in the same room. But I was told by one U.S. official that they don't want to even see the 2 men sit down with each other. They want this to be a brief meeting. They're standing up. They go over probably 3 or 4 different issues. One is the Ukraine, second is Syria, third is ISIS, and a fourth, some kind of mention of the hacking issue in some nuanced way.
How do you do that? How do you really lance that boil? I mean, does that mean he gets really aggressive? How do you do it?
It doesn't seem like that's his style with Putin. Like every time people want him to, his own staff urges him to, he tends to go friendly instead. And you remember, for him, personal chemistry matters a lot. So that's one thing we're going to be looking for. Do they actually have personal chemistry? We saw it with China's leader. We saw it with the king of Saudi Arabia. We saw it with Bibi Netanyahu of Israel. These kind of things matter for him. And whether he can actually establish a connection with Vladimir Putin that doesn't seem politically perilous is a really interesting question.
Congressman, what do you want to see from that meeting?
Well, I want to see, it's one thing to talk, that's fine. You know, I meet with ambassadors from all these countries in my role as a member of Congress, and you always have better relationships with those you actually personally get along with. That matters. So if there is chemistry, as was mentioned, between the two, maybe that can bode for something. But I think the president needs to be very clear to Vladimir Putin. You know, let's try to discover areas we can work together. That's fine. We're a world power. They're a great power, arguably. But at the same time, we're not going to give any ground. We have to defend our NATO allies. You're bombing hospitals with precision munitions in Syria, which is totally unacceptable. You were complacent in the use of chemical weapons. You're propping up a regime that is perpetuating ISIS, and that's not acceptable to us. So I think have personal chemistry, great, but also be tough.
My bet is that it's a very brief meeting, you know, no more than half an hour. They don't want him actually to go in by himself. They don't want to see a repeat of the 1986 meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev, which everyone had high hopes for on disarmament, and it broke down in a terrible collapse over the issue of Star Wars. And so they're trying to prevent that kind of dynamic where they both come in strong-willed. One's Russia first, one's America first, and they find out there actually is very little common ground.
Peter, you used to live there.
At the beginning of Putin's term, yeah.
He comes in this meeting how?
He comes to this meeting trying to take the measure of this new president. This is the 4th president he's going to have worked with, okay? Clinton, Bush, Obama, and now Trump. He respects toughness. He doesn't respect weakness. He decided, rightly or wrongly, that Obama was not a tough guy. And the question is whether or not Trump acts tough. We know he can, right? We don't know whether he will. Putin is going to be taking Trump's measure. How much can he get away with? This is not exactly what Putin would have wanted. He wanted sanctions to be lifted. He wanted a better relationship with the United States. Politically, that's impossible now for President Trump, even if he wanted to. So what he's going to look at this meeting and say, what can I get? You know, what can I get out of Trump? How do I work with him, or how do I work past him?
So if you were Putin, how would you manipulate him or try to get around him from...
Putin knows how to run the KGB playbook. I mean, he knows how to work people. So I would appeal to the president's, you know, self-image. That's, I think, how you can get to the president if you're Vladimir Putin. If I'm the president, I'm going to be very aware of that. And again, there's nothing wrong with getting along. But what Vladimir Putin, he's a smart guy. I don't like him, smart guy. He is going to advance the cause of Russia until he hits a brick wall. He's hit a brick wall in a few areas. I think we need to make it clear that your growth of the former Soviet Union is over. You can be a great power that's respected, fine, but this is not going to be the old Soviet Union. And you're meeting a new president now that's willing willing to stand up to that.
Knowing that there's this investigation going on, knowing that, people are saying he's not tough enough, can he overreact? How do you walk that line?
It'd be interesting. What will Trump say about Putin, right? Remember President Bush got in trouble for saying he had seen into his soul. He was seen as being too gullible in that sense. Trump can't afford, politically at home, you would think, to seem too friendly with him, because people are going to say, well, wait a second, this just shows that this has been,
Putin comes in much stronger than Trump does.
Of course.
I think it's been interesting, though, because there's a lot of talk about him not being tough on Russia. The actions of this administration and Vladimir Putin and President Trump are actually some of the toughest Russian hawk-type measures this government in a very long time. But I think if we back away, I will raise holy hell on it, because this is very important for us to make a statement that Russia does not meddle, not just in our elections, here and the future, but in our allies.
Peter, when you look at his foreign policy team, are their voices really being heard?
So you have some of the people on the staff around the president who are skeptical about Russia. They think they've discovered, as you saw with the meeting with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, where they released those pictures from the Kremlin of the smiles and so forth, that the staff only matters so much. In the end, there's only so far they can go in sort of directing a president. It's going to be up to him to decide what he wants to do and how he wants this meeting to play out.
And Robin, I want to go back to something you said, which is you said Putin goes in in a stronger position.
Absolutely. And even when you look at the recent Pew poll that looked at favorability ratings among world leaders, and both Vladimir Putin and President Xi Jinping in China were viewed by the international community as being willing to do the right thing more than the American president. Donald Trump only came in with 22%. So Putin is much stronger, and Trump looks very vulnerable at the moment, both at home and in the international community.
Hey, Congressman, I want you Air Force Reserve.
Yeah.
You've been up there flying. What did you fly?
RC-26.
Okay.
Still fly it.
Oh, okay, of course you're in the reserves. There you go. So you flew the RC-26, are still flying the RC-26. When you see what the Russians are doing, buzzing our airplanes, intercepting our airplanes, I know a lot of that is normal. I know we do it too. But lately it seems like there's been a lot more unsafe and unprofessional behavior.
It's true. And, these are kind of old Cold War tactics. Both sides do it. But when you have a plane that comes within 5 feet of, I think, a KC-135, that's not intentional. My view is that's a bad pilot that's not really good at intercepts. And when you come within 5 feet, that's when it becomes dangerous. You have a military of Vladimir Putin that's not well trained, and this could escalate to some sort of an incident.
So what's our policy right now if you have somebody towards Russia?
In some ways, on paper, it's not that different than President Obama's, which is find ways to work together where you have shared interests, be tough in areas where you have conflicts, whether it be Syria, Ukraine, and so forth. Whether it's actually executed or not, and how it's executed, is the real question.
I don't know if I could describe our Russian policy. I couldn't have described it under President Obama, and probably couldn't have described it under George W. Bush. Look, they're a competitor. They're a strong nation, something we need to recognize, but their economy is just a little bit bigger than Illinois. So they're not our equal. I think it's important to engage them, and I think it's important that we continue to fight for human rights, which is essential to denying the next generation of terrorists their recruits. And this is a long-term fight we're in when it comes to the war on terror, and I think the Russians are exacerbating this by making people displaced and killing families, and that's how you lead to radicalization.
I think it's still evolving. The danger, I think, is that the Russians look at Donald Trump and they're going to play him. And I'm not sure we know how to counter that, or that we have the clout or leverage to do it.